Hello, and welcome to Mechanicsburg Mystery Presents a conversation with Steve Hockensmith. Steve has been writing for over 2 decades, and he has amassed a number of awards and nominations, including the Derringer Award for Short Fiction, nominations for the Anthony and Edgar, and even the Seamus Award, and several others as well, I'm certain of that. He has had what you might call a very varied career. He has written a series of books featuring two cowboys inspired by the works of Sherlock Holmes, one of which here I have, A Crack in the Lens. The series is called Holmes on the Range, and it consists of 7 books, I believe. No, yeah, 7 books, 2 short story collections, and a novella collection. There's also a spin-off pure Western series called the AA Western Detective Agency. There is also a series of children's books featuring Nick and Tesla, of which there's, I think, 6 or 7. 6? Is that right, Dustin?
Yeah, that's right.
See, called you Dustin. I knew it was going to happen. There's this weird thing. I don't know why I'm doing this, so just bear with me for a minute. He's really Steve and not Dustin. He also has written, among other things, 2 sequels to Pride and Prejudice and Zombies, a zombie presidential story called Cadaver in Chief, and a collection of Christmas stories called Naughty, 9 Tales of Christmas Crime. And we'll get started. So, Steve, thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Oh, it is my pleasure. Thank you for having me on.
Yes, I am a Sherlock fan, so I was naturally pleased to look over your books, and I actually also bought the Partners in Crime short story collection.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you
Because
so much.
personally, I feel like Sherlock Holmes really works very well, at least the Conan Doyle stories, in the short story format. Now, the Holmes on the Range series features Otto Amlingmeyer. Is that pronounced correctly?
That's right.
And Gustav. They're brothers. They have red hair and they're very different personalities. So why don't you introduce us to them?
Yeah, well, thank you. It's, yes, as you said, it's Otto and Gustav, Big Red and Old Red, as they're also known. And sort of the backstory of the series is that Ellery Queen Mystery Magazine, you as a Sherlock Holmes aficionado probably already know this. For many, many years, Ellery Queen has done a Sherlock Holmes tribute issue. It's usually their January, February issue, in that I believe it's canonically, or I don't know if it's canonically been established, but the Sherlockians have embraced the Sherlock. Isn't it right that Sherlock Holmes' birthday is like January 19th or something like that? So that's why they tend to do that issue around that time of year. And this was going back many years. This was going back about 25 years. I was selling Christmas stories to Ellery Queen for their Christmas issue every year. And I was trying to think of like, well, what's another clever way to make the odds a little bit better that I can sell a story to Ellery Queen? Like, oh, they do a Sherlock Holmes issue. And I have always been, fond of Sherlock Holmes. My dad was a huge Sherlock Holmes fan. So I came up with this idea of a Sherlock Holmes story that wasn't a Sherlock Holmes story because even though Ellery Queen will publish the occasional pastiche in those issues, they usually the stories are a little, more like inspired by or sort of offshoots of. And I didn't want to try to do a pastiche because, boy, just to imitate. And this was earlier in my writing career, so I was still figuring out what my own style is, and that's hard enough. Let alone trying to copy someone else's style, and that just seemed like a really big challenge. Really hems you in. So I didn't know if I could pull off an English Edwardian Victorian voice. So, but I did, as I thought about it, I did have confidence that I could pull off an American historic voice. And in trying to think of like, well, okay, what's my spinoff? How do I do this differently? Where it's about Sherlock Holmes, but it's not Sherlock Holmes. I came to realize that the Holmes stories, mostly are set in the time period that overlaps with what we call the Wild West. The Victorian era is the Wild West era. They're basically the same. And I thought, oh, wow, brainstorm. What would people in the Wild West think about Sherlock Holmes. Like, let's say if the Strand is somehow making it across the seas and somebody picks one up at a train station in Topeka, what are they going to think about this? And so that was the track my brain was running on. And I thought, well, okay, if I'm saying I want it to be Americans who run across Sherlock Holmes and they react to it and we get to see what they do with that, who are the most fun characters that I could have do that in the Wild West? We're like, oh, well, gotta be cowboys, right? And it had to be cowboys, I realized, because of sort of the classic construction of Holmes and Watson, that if you've got one brilliant detective, you can't have the whole story be from his perspective because everything he figures out along the way, you'll see, and there's no surprise. The reader doesn't get to solve things on their own, like try to figure it out before the end of the story, because the detective's just figuring it out along the way. So you have an observer character who's like seeing all the same things, but maybe not putting it all together, or definitely not putting it all together. And that is sort of the conduit for the reader. So I knew I needed to have one really, really smart cowboy and one he's not dumb, but one not deduction minded cowboy, and it just made sense. Like, well, if these guys are going to be a series, and I thought, like, well, I should keep that door open. They should have a reason for traveling around together. Maybe they're not just like buddies, maybe they're brothers. So yeah, that's how they were born, Gustav and Otto. And I did sell that story to Ellery Queen Mr. Magazine. It was called Dear Mr. Holmes. And after doing a few of those stories for Ellery Queen, I sold more to them. That's when I decided, oh gosh, I guess I should try this as a book. And that's where Holmes on the Range came from.
Yeah. And the relationship between the two brothers is very funny. It's really it's contentious. Gustav's tends, excuse me, Gustav tends to be the quiet type, says very little. And in Cracking the Lens, there's a point where he does speak, and he speaks at length, and it's such a shock to hear him be quiet for most of the book and then suddenly just go off at length because he has to talk about the story. um or is that actually, I'm reading some of your short stories, and I'll bet you that happens in one of them as well. uh yeah, but the point still stands, and Big Red he's the muscle of the
Mm.
two. And clearly he's capable of thinking his way out of traditional cowboy scenarios. Um, there's a particularly lovely scene in Cracking the Lens where he's basically taking to wearing what you might call banker duds as opposed to what cowboys wear. And they go to various places where he's the target because clearly he does not fit in. So he's having to think his way out.
Big Red, Otto, he is the one who he sort of fell into cowboying. The sort of backstory is that most of their family has passed away tragically. And Gustav had already been out on the trail as a cowboy, had left home young, as was the case with cowboys. These were just young men who didn't have skills for other kinds of jobs, and that's why they end up at this basically very dangerous manual labor. So Gustav has to come back and collect Otto and sort of take him under his wing, but all he knows how to do at that point is be a cowboy. So Otto goes along with it, but it's never to him like his identity. For Gustav, it really is a huge part of his identity. It was how he sort of went out into the world the first time and sort of showed himself that he was capable and could be on his own. But Otto is just even though he is the muscle, like you say, he's the big one. There's a reason he's Big Red. He's also a very sort of jovial, loquacious guy who sort of fancies himself more a man of the world. And so that's why when they have their first big adventures, their first big mysteries, um, for Otto, it's very natural to say like, oh, well, you know what I should be doing is I should be writing these down, and taking the cue from John Watson and saying like, well, if that guy can sell those stories, I can try to sell those stories. So one of the running threads to the series is Big Red trying to be like Watson and writing these things down. And it starts off as letters he's writing to various people, and then it starts off as stories he's submitting places, and then he gets accepted, and he starts selling. And by the time we're in the series now, he's a published author with all these, in these sorts of, dime novels, so they're like pretty trashy. But he's a published guy, and he's sort of like an American D grade John Watson.
Yeah, and there's certain scenes. There's certainly some in Crack in the Lens. This is in the middle of the series, by the way, folks. It's book 4, where he actually comes across one of those magazines with his story in it, and he's able to look at it. This guy, he's in jail, Big Red, are in jail, and they get the story, and it's like he's just absolutely thrilled and stunned, and he asked the guy if he could, can I keep it, can I just keep it for a day so I can look at it? And the guy says, well, can you sign it? And he signs it, and the guy says, well, no, I don't want you to keep it because this might be worth something. So already autograph hunters, collectors.
And I'm
Yeah,
sure, I'm sure Otto was in grave, grave danger at that point, as they usually
yeah,
are, almost every point in the stories. But I'm sure, like, yes, for him, the most important thing was like, I'm published, which all us writers can really identify with.
yeah. Now, are you a Western fan?
I am. I am. I was always fond of the genre more as a movie watcher. My dad, again, loved Sherlock Holmes, loved Western. He was one of those, baby boomer kids who, although he was slightly on the older end of the baby boom, but he grew up going to those Saturday serials and seeing, Gene Autry and Roy Rogers and Tex Ritter and Lash LaRue and all those guys and then on to like the classy stuff, the John Ford, John Wayne stuff. Um, and so, I always grew up with those on, and I was always fond of those, always enjoyed those. But for whatever reason, as a reader, I never gravitated towards those. I guess I probably saw them as dad and granddad stuff. Even though, like, I remember as a kid, I did read Shane. It was a class, assignment, and I liked it. But then, I was just much more, I guess, a kid of my generation, and I loved Star Trek and Star Wars, and I read science fiction and all that. But when it came time to start the book series of the Holmes on the Range series, I did want to become familiar with what people are writing about the period. And I will say that at the time, in the beginning, I was a little precious about it. I would sort of want to go back in time and slap myself because I remember being very particular about saying, these are not Westerns. These are historical mysteries that happen to be set in the period we call the Old West, but it's really just the 1890s Western United States. So I don't think of them as Westerns. I think of them as historical mysteries, and that's how I approach them. It's like they're plotted like mysteries. I research them like mysteries. I don't want to have Western sort of cliches or tropes intrude. And I will say, as the years have gone on, not that I've embraced cliches and tropes, but I've embraced the Western genre, and I've just sort of like pushed aside my. I think I was just scared that I was going to scare off readers. I think I was scared because I was aware that there are a lot of readers who hate Westerns, or at least
Mhm.
assume they hate Westerns. And the thing is, when you start reading Westerns, there are a lot of bad ones. There's a lot of great ones. There's a lot of great ones, and I have read now a lot of great ones. So I've really fallen. It's my favorite genre to read, actually, now. Like, I love picking up a Western. But that only happened when I started writing them myself, and I was like, well, I guess I should see what other people are doing. And it turned out, yeah, it's great. It's great fun.
Yeah, but and I noticed that you had to have done quite a bit of research because you're replicating how Westerners talked, the way the towns look. You can't just rely on movies for this. You're in Cracking the Lens. You actually, I don't know if it was a real book, but you're looking at psychology, and so you're quoting from some psychiatrist's book as if it was written from that time, and it sounded very authentic. So you must have done quite a bit of research.
Oh yeah, no, I will say that the first, let's see. Well, I was gonna say like the first 5 books are very research heavy, and then I decided just to make the writing more fun, and because I just had less time, I was gonna try to go lighter on the research. But the seventh novel that came out 2 years ago, Hundreds of Dead, that one was very research heavy again. So the first one, uh, it's set on a cattle ranch. And yeah, I didn't want to just be like, well, I watched 5 episodes of The Big Valley. I know how to do this. No, I wanted to treat it seriously as a historical novel. So I read, and I still have a lot of my notes. This is back in the day when you would go to the library and Xerox them. So I have stacks of Xeroxes of things that have to do with cattle ranching and the West in the period, the United States in that period, clothing in that period, and a lot of it to do with cowboy lingo and cowboy culture. So like I research. The second book, On the Wrong Track, it takes place almost entirely on a train. It's a classic mystery thing, a train mystery. And I realized like, well, I can't just like go get on a train and go over the Sierra Nevadas. I've got to do research. So the third book, The Black Dove, was set in Chinatown in San Francisco. And I had to research Chinatown, San Francisco, Chinese culture, just like really dig into it. The fourth book was a little bit of a break that cracking the lens. Um, because it's, San Marcos, Texas is the setting, which is a real town. So I did some research into that. And yes, it's not to give away any spoilers, but it plays around with the idea of some possible overlap with the Jack the Ripper sort of universe. So I did some research into that and sort of what was known at the time, or what thoughts about the time about things like serial killers, that is what we would call them today, but what would the thinking be about them then? So, and then the fifth book, World's Greatest Sleuth, is set at the World's Columbian Exposition in Chicago. And it's, oh my God, the research I had to do to that book, because I felt like in that book, I not only did I need this for myself, I wanted it for the reader to feel like as my characters are going through the World's Fair in Chicago, everything is like you're walking through it. They look over here and what do they see? And you see it. And they look over here and what do they see? And you see it. And then, it's all important to the plot. I'm not just doing it as a travelogue, but I just felt like I had to really understand the whole place because they're running around through the whole, the mystery takes them from one end to the other of the White City. And I felt like I had to know it. So like blah, 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 all that to say, yes, I really, really get into the research. And, that's partially because I feel like as a guy who's trying to write historical novels, I need that. It's also because I'm a history nerd and I just love the research. It's so much fun.
Well, you never know what you're going to come across. That's what makes it so much fun, is to just come find. And also you're having to put yourself in the mindset of the people who are there, and you've played with that certainly in the first short story in Partners in Crime, where they're going back to the ranch that they grew up on, and they're having to count what modernity has imported. And you actually have a very nice little scene of this package being delivered, a big package. Everybody's out to see it, and it's the first indoor toilet.
Yes, the first commode arrives in Peabody, Kansas, and the whole town comes out to have a parade. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, no, I was really pleased with that. That sort of as a metaphor for how the town has changed and progress is like, oh, look, they've got one of these things here now. But to what you said about the things you discover when you do the research, a tip that I would give to people who are thinking of writing, not just a historical novel, but any novel that involves a lot of research, is do the research first to the degree that you can. Because I have found that, because I'm an outliner, and if I do the research first, just so many ideas for the story come out of the research. You're reading a book about something and you see some crazy thing, like in World's Greatest Sleuth. There was a thing at the World's Fair called the Mammoth Cheese of Canada. And it was a big, like it was like looked like a water tower type thing, but it was filled with cheese from Canada. And the thing that of course I had to read about this. And like, I got to get this into the book somehow. This is a real thing. And one of the things I learned about the Mammoth cheese of Canada is that they had to flip it every few days because all the moisture would sink down to the bottom. So it would get very gloppy on the bottom and very dry and hard up top. They would flip it and start it all over again. And what I realized was, well, if you fell into it when it had just been flipped, and it's all gloppy, that'd be not very pleasant. You can in fact suffocate in the mammoth. So spoiler, but the murder victim, the primary murder victim in World's Greatest Sleuth, is suffocated in the mammoth cheese of Canada. And I would not have known that that was even a thing if I hadn't done the research first.
Yeah. That's one reason why one of my favorite authors is George MacDonald Fraser, and for that very reason, because he brought so much historical material, so much historical truths into the Flashman series. This was the first book I saw that actually had footnotes, and I was absolutely thrilled to see fiction with footnotes, so you can go to the back. And I remember actually getting out, it was one set in Sarawak about the Raja of Sarawak, one of these British adventurers who went down to the area around Indonesia and managed to become the Raja of Sarawak. And this was when I was in college, so I could actually go down to the library and pull his memoirs off the shelf and look through it to confirm that yes, that was a real story, and this is how he actually did it. But it's also what I find interesting about the research. You have Do you find it hard to get into the mind of your characters, into the way they think or act? Because this is so, right now, I grew up in the 60s and 70s, and we're talking, tell the kids, oh, three networks, no cell phones, movies everywhere that we would pick up watching, from silent films to something that just came out the year before. And that's not even a far cry from the old West. Is that a challenge?
Actually, I'll say most of the time, no. For me, for most of the characters, I feel like I know the period well enough, although having not lived there, but, having read a ton about it and read a ton of material from that period, like the canon, the Sherlock Holmes story, you get a feel for, sort of the manners and mores of the time. Um, that's something I do try to mostly stay true to. Although you have to find your wriggle room, because if your characters really did stick to all of the conventions and ways of speaking of the time, you would alienate modern readers really fast.
Yeah.
Even your most lovable characters would maybe not be so lovable. So you do have to make adjustments for the modern sensibilities.
Mhm.
Um, the character where I do sometimes have a hard time, like, just really figuring out, like, what is going through his head right now is Gustav.
Mm.
Otto, Big Red, I never have the slightest bit of problem, and thank God for that, because he's the narrator, right? So if there was one or the other that I'm going to have a harder time, sort of getting in touch with, you don't want it to be your narrator, because then you're really in trouble. So, like, Otto he's always reacting to things. He's always having things to say. He's a pretty glib guy, and it's very easy to write him. Um, but Gustav, like, there are times, because Gustav is, as you mentioned, he's a very quiet internal character who, really has struggled with a lot. But he's a guy who won't talk about what he struggled with. So sometimes he's struggling, but, like, how exactly is he reacting? And in fact, it reminds me of one of the big challenges, or one of the big questions I had to face about him eventually. It was an unanswered question. A central conceit of the stories and the books up to about very recently in the series is that Gustav can't read.
Mhm.
And there was a reason that I set that up, because that's another reason for Otto to exist and to have a function in the stories. Because, if you look at, let's say, oh God, what's his name? Philo Vance stories, S.S. Van
Mhm.
Dien, the narrator has no function and no personality. It's just like this blank slate. And sometimes you even forget that the narrator is a person in the room.
Mhm.
It's just this conduit for the author. And those books are fun, but that's something I don't love about those books. John Watson is is a character, and he usually has a reason to be there. He often actually kind of doesn't. He just kind of gets dragged along. And I think, not that I'm saying, so I would improve on Arthur Conan Doyle, but for modern readers, they want protagonists who are active. And so I don't think you can have one of your two protagonists just be the guy who's like, and then he did this, and then he did that, and then I said you're a genius. You've got to give him something to do. So all blah 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 blah. Otto had to have stuff he could do, and one is he can punch people, and another one is he can talk, their way in and out of things, because he's glib, he's good like that. And another thing is he can read. But one of the things to finally circle back to the question was, why can't Gustav read? And I was established that like he only had a little bit of schooling, very true to the time, grew up on this Kansas farm, very poor family. But now he's been out and about, and we know that he's a very intelligent guy. So why did he never teach himself to read? And so I, kind of really was wondering for a while, like, is he dyslexic? Maybe he's dyslexic. Um, but I hadn't answered the question for myself. And so that's one of those things of like, what is he thinking? And I didn't even know for sure. Is he dyslexic, or is he afraid of this challenge? He's afraid of failure. But in the later books and stories, we've now established um, that he is not dyslexic. He can teach himself to read. He is finally teaching himself to read, and he's letting people help him learn how to read, which is something that he would have, because he was very sensitive about his limitations. That's what was holding him back. And now, with the encouragement of his brother and their friend Diana, he's blossoming.
Yeah. Well, and now that you've had a number of books in the series under your belt, and you launched in 2018 the Double A Western Detective Agency, you decided to branch out with that agency into more traditional westerns. So you have two books out, Hired Guns and No Hallowed Ground, both from last year, as a matter of fact. Are you who are these people? Do Big Red and Old Red show up in these books?
They haven't yet. There are three main characters in that series: Deal, Hoop, and Escamindum. And they're all guys who were in the 10th Cavalry together. Escamindum, an Apache, as a scout, and Hoop is a trooper, and Deal is an officer. And they have sort of gone off to be sort of hired guns, troubleshooters, pseudo mercenaries, actually. And so let's see, Hoop and Escamindum. Well, actually, this is a spoiler alert, but Hoop and Escamindum show up in one of the books um, uh, a little early. And then in a subsequent book, Deal, Hoop, and Escamindum are all there. So though they have appeared in Holmes in the Range books, um, but Big Red and Old Red have not appeared in the Hired Guns detective agency books yet.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and it remains to be seen if that series will continue, and if they'll have a chance for crossovers. In my head canon, they'll have many adventures together, and the sort of the casts of the books would really mix up a lot. Of like sometimes maybe Big Red would go along with the guys in one of the Hired Guns books and just like be one of the dudes who has like this more sort of action Western adventure with the guys. Or maybe we swap out in a Holmes in the Range novel, and instead of Big Red, maybe Deal is there the whole time. I don't know, but we shall see what future books bring.
Right. And these are more traditional westerns as opposed to a mystery set in the West.
Yeah, I became so fond of Westerns, like I was saying earlier, that I really wanted to write one. Like, and I still have stayed true to my initial pretentious declaration about the Holmes and the Range books, that they are historical mysteries and they are
Mhm.
structured like mysteries, and they're whodunits. And that means that I have to approach the plotting of them in a very specific way, and it's hard. Writing mysteries is hard. I'm sure that you've had many guests say this. Sure, you know it. Writing mysteries is really, really, really hard. And having fallen in love with westerns, I wanted to sort of give myself a break from mystery plotting and just see what I could do if I just like, here's a rough situation. My guys are in a bad scene, and these are bad dudes that they're up against. What's going to happen? And see how that plays out. And it was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed writing both of those books.
Yeah. And Agatha Christie would agree with you because she did the same thing after writing Mysterious Affair at Styles. She got burned out on the plotting and making sure the clues are all that. And she wrote The Secret Adversary afterwards just to clear her head, I guess. But she also enjoyed writing like a conspiracy thriller because you didn't have to necessarily plot everything down to the nth degree.
Hmm. Yeah, it's a palate cleanser, and then I was able to come back to the Holmes on the Range series after that. I'm doing an eighth novel in the series right now. And it still is very hard, but I felt like I was refreshed after
Mm.
taking that break.
Yeah. Now you've also done the Nick and Tesla books. I wanted to go into those because that's is it still a mystery? It's something for kids, and I know that there are experiments in there that they can actually try out for themselves. Can you tell us about it?
Yeah, yeah. So those are books that I wrote with a guy that people might know if they watch Jimmy Kimmel, the guy called Science Bob Pflugfelder. Science Bob will show up. He's like Jimmy Kimmel's Mr. Science or Mr. Wizard, where he'll show up and he'll do wacky experiments and like create foam cannons and like that kind of stuff. And a number of years ago, the Quirk books, the publisher that I had written the prequel and the sequel to Pride and Prejudice and Zombies for, they were interested in starting a kids series that would be integrated with maker culture, which is this idea of like just making things yourself. And so they asked me to kick around that idea. What could I come up with? So I developed the backstory for Nick and Tesla, and I found Science Bob of like, oh, this, how about I team up with a guy whose specialty is making wacky things from household stuff. And so how it came together was that these would be mysteries where for kids, but through the course of the book, the kids make different science projects that help them solve the mystery until at the end, the final thing they make helps them, catch the bad guys, resolve the story. Which is I will, pat myself on the back, and the fine folks at Quirk, very clever, incredibly hard,
I was gonna
incredibly hard to
say, good Lord.
yeah, no, I realized this the further I got into them. I was like, not only do you have to have a mystery plot that works, right? Because even if it's for a kid's book, mystery plots are hard. And it's got to make sense, and you've got to have red herrings, and you've got to have all these things layered in. And you have to incorporate into them science projects that somehow relate to the mystery. And it was really brain breaking. But I think we did a good job. One of them was a finalist for an Edgar Award, so that was a real pat on the back.
Very nice.
Um,
Very nice.
I was
Congratulations.
very happy about well earned. Then I won't say like I deserve to win. I'm just saying like we earned that nomination because
Yeah.
oh my God, those books were so hard to plot.
Yeah. And it's the kind of thing it's worth it if I had, God knows, if my son was the right age. What age would this be good for? What age for a child would this be good for?
I'd say that like the being middle grade, so some people sort of push it one way or the other, but I would say like 9 to 12
Hmm.
would be about the right zone because like there's a lot of humor, and they're meant to be really fun, um, but the projects I still would have a hard time with them because I am not a very sciencey or mechanically minded person. So thank God for Science Bob, who is those things. And so I'm sure that any sciencey or mechanically minded 12-year-old could run circles around me in terms of these projects. But anybody too much younger, I think, would have a hard time with that aspect of the book.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's the great range in which like I said, they're all Nick and Tesla. They have something that's part of the title. So if you're going to look it up, if you to look up Steve Hockensmith, you can look up Nick and Tesla's Robot Army Rampage, Nick and Tesla's Special Effects Spectacular. They sound like really fun things to do.
Yeah, that we tried real hard. Science Bob always came up with great science projects. But we wrapped that up after 6 books. And one nice thing about the way we wrapped it up is there's a part of the backstory works it plays itself out through the whole series of Nick and Tesla's parents disappear and they end up living with their wacky uncle who's like the sort of the sort of classic wacky inventor, with a lab in his basement. Um, but they're always wondering like what happened to their parents, why, what became of them, and what's the story there. And they get little clues as the book as the series goes on until what is it? Nick and Tesla's Solar Power Showdown, I think, is the last book.
Hmm.
And it's all is resolved. So we didn't leave people hanging. We actually wrapped up the story. We have a real conclusion. So I was
Oh,
very happy about that.
oh, that's very nice. I've read a couple of those series as well. There's some Agatha related series, and they go 3 books, they're done. And I really like that because that gives you kind of a nice slice of fiction that is not trying to drag itself out, from book to book to book.
Yeah, no, I think that we did it just right. I can say in hindsight, six books was just the right number. I think
Mhm.
we were able to sort of tell our stories. I think we told our stories that we were going to tell and wrap it up. And oh my gosh, I think we did everything we could do in terms of science projects.
I think so. 1 book a year, and the kid will age out of the series. So you just limit it to that.
Well, yeah, it's all supposed to take place over one summer too. Like there's only so much even kids in a book series can get into in one summer.
That's right. That's right. Now, I understand from your website bio that you got your start in entertainment journalism. So, how did it come about that you end up like writing for the Hollywood Reporter and some other major newspapers?
Oh wow. Well, let's see. I have to really go back into the Wayback Machine. Uh, to use a reference that today's youth would not understand at all. Well, let's see. So, back in the day when I was a youngster myself, and this was, of course, a very long time ago, I knew I wanted to be a writer. Like I knew I wanted to be a writer, from the time I was a kid actually, and would make my own magazines and comic book stories and stuff like that. But when it came time to get ready to go to college, you don't go to college to become a comic book writer, or you don't go to college. Well, some people go to college to become a novelist. I don't think it's a great idea, actually.
Yeah.
You should come out with not that it's like a trade school, but you should come out of college with a clear career trajectory, hopefully. And so journalism was just the thing that made sense. I'm a writer, words are my thing. So I guess I'll become a journalist. And I always loved movies and pop culture and sort of nerdy TV stuff. So when I was in college, I ended up writing for the student newspaper and doing movie reviews and writing about any kind of pop culture thing I possibly could. That eventually led to an internship at People magazine. That was very cool. And then once I got out of school and ended up living in Chicago, I ended up at a trade magazine there that was focused on the film and television industry in Chicago, and that led to writing for the Chicago Tribune about pop culture stuff, which led to later writing for the Sun Times, and later becoming the editor of the X-Files official magazine for a time, which I was when X-Files was a really big deal, which led to, for the same company, editing a film and TV magazine called Cinescape, which led to writing for the Hollywood Reporter and Variety and what the freelance clients. And that was my kind of journey of being an entertainment journalist, which lasted like pretty much from like 1990 to 2000.
Wow.
And it's funny, just as my fiction was taking off and becoming a thing, that part of my career kind of wound down. I ended up living in the Bay Area, um, and just sort of letting go of that side of my career. It's something I would still do sporadically, but I think I was much more excited at that point about doing the novels and trying to create my own stuff.
Yeah. And you get enough experience, something from the real world, and actually considering the impact the internet has had. Ah, sorry about that. Let me turn that off. I always supposed to have turned that off. I turned it off when earlier and I forgot to do it again. But anyway, though, the it's it's almost like, especially as a writer, you're jumping from ice flow to ice flow because you're getting out of journalism, um, just as the internet was really taking off, and now publishing is kind of starting to falter as well. And some of these books you're putting out yourself, right? You've like got the rights back and you're publishing them yourself.
Yeah, yeah, no, that you're absolutely right. That like I've been around long enough that I've seen many changes, and your ice flow is a great way of expressing it. It's like, well, that one's drifting that way, and that one's going that way. That one looks like that one's going for a waterfall. I think I better go that one. So that's sort of I've been hopping, and yeah, gosh, self-publishing has been a sort of a thing for what, like 10 years now? Whenever the Kindle like kind of really broke big and Amazon really started pushing ebooks,
Mhm.
um, which I feel like was about 10 years ago. And I'm sorry, can you hear my dog walking around? I hope there's.
I can see your puppy.
Oh,
That
there.
is
Okay, we
so
got a
cute.
special guest star. So yeah, we'll see if she lets me keep talking. That this might be my version of the phone because
Well,
she might
we're
let me
almost
know.
done here. So if the
Okay,
dog
so
needs to go out, the
okay,
dog should go
yeah,
out.
he, just a minute, Amy, just a minute. So yeah, like I was very curious about self-publishing from the get-go, and sort of dipped my toe into it, experimented with it, and was pretty pleased with my experiments.
Hmm.
I did get the rights back to the Holmes on the Range series, and I brought all those back out, and then I actually found a new publisher for them, Wolfpack Publishing, and they've done a wonderful job of packaging those all over again and allowing me to continue the series. But I have a whole other series, the Tarot Mystery series. The first book is The White Magic Five and Dime. Those were done through Midnight Ink, which went under what, like 6 years ago, something like that. And I was able to get the rights back to those books and put them out myself. And that was a fun process. And I loved getting the money every month from Amazon. I'm sorry, maybe I shouldn't speak glowingly of Amazon. Uh, you know, it's a good opportunity, and those books they ended after 3 books, but it was a series that every book in the series was going to explore a different suit in the tarot deck, and I only got through the major arcana and then 2 of the 4 suits, so there's 2 suits left, and it was always my plan that I would do 5 books in the series, and but one reason or another, just things didn't continue originally. But now I own the books, and all this to say that like I get asked fairly frequently by readers, "Are you going to do more? Are you going to do more? When are you going to do those others?" And I've always been like, one day, hopefully, yeah. And now I feel like I'm a little bit closer to finally saying like, I think I'm going to do it.
Yeah.
I think maybe next year I'll start on book 4 and finally maybe finish that series out.
Oh, very good. Very good. So what other projects, what can you look forward to in 26? How about that? Is
Well,
there
there we
anything?
go. So I will very much be looking forward to myself finishing book 8 of the Holmes and the Range series, Strong Medicine. I am officially 1/4, no, I'm a little, probably more like almost a third. Yeah, almost a third of the way into the book at the moment. And it's a little bit of a change of pace. It is again, what one thing about the series is even though they're all historical mysteries and they all have a lot of humor in them, the settings and the sort of different premises allowed me to take just a little bit of a different approach each time. The tone does change a little bit from book to book. And this one, and I didn't plan it this way, it came out this way as I started writing it. This is the first one that I would say is just like it's a screwball comedy. This is just the first one that like, nah, this one's going to be sillies and funnies hopefully. And this is the first one. And you were asking about getting into the mindset of period characters. And one thing that I've always really avoided, and it has been pretty easy to avoid it, but like sex, I have really sidestepped it a lot. In The Crank and the Lens, I get into it a little bit because there's a major character, a tragic character who was in who was a sex worker. And so you can't avoid the fact that that was what she did. Um, but other than that, I pretty much never have acknowledged the existence of human relations. And this is the first one where like there's just characters who showed up who are just like they're gonna make the guys talk about it. They're gonna make the guys face it. So we'll see what readers think of. Not that it's all of a sudden going to be an erotic novel, but
No, not especially these days. No, in fact, I'll point out there was a very funny scene near the beginning in which our heroes get involved, come up against some toughs that they know before, and you could tell this is going to be a lot of cursing. And Otto actually says, "I am going to disguise this with something else," and and the conversation is hilarious. If you know the word fudge, you could
Oh,
probably fill it in yourself, and it sounds like a Quentin Tarantino movie that has been AI altered. So
well,
it
thank
says
you so much.
something else. And in
That
this
that was
con
that was my little tribute to Deadwood. I love
Oh
the series
God.
Deadwood, but oh
Yep.
my gosh, if you have any sensitivity to language, do not watch Deadwood. So
Yeah.
I was sort of imagining, like, well, what if my guys bump into guys who talk like Deadwood? I can't possibly use that language. My readers don't want to see that language, but I don't want to pretend that people didn't use rough language. They certainly did. And so yes, my workaround was just to have every other word be fudge.
And it was and it worked beautifully. And I would also recommend the series in general, if you even if you don't like Sherlock Holmes, because it's not a Sherlock Holmes. You're not doing pastiches of Sherlock Holmes. You're not going in with that. He's just inspired, and your mysteries are your own mysteries. You're not trying to do a study in Scarlet on a dude ranch.
Exactly. No, and I feel like, the name of the series was both good and bad. It's done me a disservice, perhaps, that,
Mm,
Holmes on the Range. It's a silly pun, and it gets across exactly what the series. Oh well, it gets across almost exactly what the series is. The Wild West, Sherlock Holmes, Holmes on the Range. Like, okay. But I think a lot of people maybe hear that name and they assume it's going to be, oh, Sherlock Holmes comes to be on a dude ranch and blah, blah, blah. And it's going to be kind of dopey like that. I'm sure somebody's written a wonderful novel about Sherlock Holmes going to a dude ranch, so no offense intended. But that is not what I wanted to do. And so I've heard it both ways. I've heard it much more one way than the other. I've had a lot of people tell me I hate Westerns, but I love your books. And I've had a few people say, I'm not Sherlock Holmes, whatever, not my thing, but I like your books.
right.
So yeah, I think that they're unique enough, hopefully, that as long as you like mysteries and if you like humor, uh, you'll find something to like.
Yeah. And they're very well written. I think they're definitely worth looking into, which is of course why Mechanicsburg Mystery has copies of these of your books there for sale. So come on down and take a look. That's all we ask.
And I'll say, even though I might have mentioned that company that should not be mentioned, but I'm sure that all of my books could be ordered through the store.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And they do have copies for sale because they gave me this one. So Steve, I want to thank you so much. You've been very gracious to us in talking about everything. And I'm really glad we got into some other issues as well, just because I like a conversation, not an interrogation. So thank you very much.
Thank you,
Okay.
Bill. This was a lot of fun.
Absolutely. And I want to thank you, the readers at home, for dropping in and listening to us. I'm Bill Peschel from Mechanicsburg Mystery, and I hope your favorite book is the one you're reading right now. Thank you, and bye bye. Mechanicsburg Mystery Presents is sponsored by the Mechanicsburg Mystery Bookshop in Mechanicsburg, Pennsylvania. To learn more about the store, visit the website at www.mysterybooksonline.com. And thank you for listening.